a relaxed hoodie, a high-end showroom, and an unexpected twist. What unfolds when a car dealership manager misinterprets the true identity of the man who quietly owns the entire business. Daryl pulled into the parking lot of Prestige Motors, a luxury dealership he had recently acquired in Scottsdale, Arizona. The desert heat shimmered off the high-end vehicles parked outside, their glossy finishes practically glowing in the afternoon sun. He parked his modest SUV in an unmarked spot at the back and stepped out, dressed in a simple gray hoodie, slightly worn jeans, and sneakers. His goal for the day was to observe the dealership's operations without anyone knowing he was the new owner. Inside, Daryl noticed a group of employees near the front desk laughing and chatting. The moment he walked in, the atmosphere shifted. The air-conditioned showroom offered a stark contrast to the heat outside, filled with the scent of leather and fresh wax. The employees' glances were subtle but noticeable as they sized him up, clearly questioning his casual attire. Then, from across the showroom, Susan approached. A middle-aged woman with sharp features, her tailored blazer and polished heels exuded authority. She walked toward him with purpose, her heels clicking against the polished floor. Her smile was polite at first, but it carried an edge of doubt. "Excuse me," Susan began, her voice cool and clipped. "Can I help you with something?" Daryl smiled calmly, his demeanor relaxed. "Just here to look around," he replied casually, gesturing toward the cars. Susan's eyes narrowed, scanning him from head to toe. "Are you shopping for a car?" she asked, her tone carrying a hint of skepticism. Daryl nodded, maintaining his smile. Something like that. Susan's lips tightened. "Well, we cater to a very specific clientele here. Most of our inventory requires pre-qualification. Perhaps I could recommend," before she could finish, another employee called out, "Hey, Susan, the delivery guy is here." Her attention wavered for a moment, but she quickly turned back to Daryl, as if to ensure he wouldn't wander too far. Daryl raised an eyebrow, his tone light as he asked, "You're assuming I'm not qualified?" Susan's eyes widened briefly, but she quickly recovered, her posture stiffening. "I'm just trying to save you some time," she replied with a forced smile. "These vehicles start at 6 figures. Maybe I can direct you to?" Daryl glanced around the showroom, pretending to admire a nearby silver coupe. He ran his fingers lightly over the door handle, glancing back at Susan. "Nice car," he said simply. Susan's brows furrowed, her smile still present but less genuine. "It is. Perhaps when you're ready to make a serious inquiry, we can set up an appointment. For now, I'll have to ask you not to touch the vehicles." Daryl took a moment to process her words before stepping back from the car. He nodded, hands in his pockets. "All right, let's hear it. What would you recommend for someone like me?" Susan blinked, caught off guard by his directness. Before she could respond, Daryl added, "If you think you know what I need, I'm all ears." Her polite facade cracked just enough to show her impatience. "Maybe something a little more budget-friendly. I can give you directions to a dealership that specializes in pre-owned vehicles." Daryl smiled faintly, though it didn't reach his eyes. "That's quite the assumption," he said softly. The words hung in the air. And for a moment, Susan faltered. She quickly recovered, straightening her shoulders. "I'll be back with a list of options," she said briskly, walking away. Daryl watched her go, his expression unreadable. He turned back to the silver coupe, his reflection staring back at him in the glossy finish. This was going to be an interesting day. A few moments later, Susan returned, clipboard in hand, a forced smile in place. She walked up to him, her stride brisk, clearly eager to finish the exchange. "All right," she said, stopping a few feet away. "I've compiled a few options that might be more suitable for your situation." Daryl tilted his head slightly. "My situation?" "Yes," Susan replied curtly, handing him a printout of pre-owned vehicles, each priced well below the dealership's typical inventory. "These are more accessible models, reliable, economical, and practical." Daryl scanned the list, used sedans, older SUVs, and a compact hybrid. His lips twitched with faint amusement, but he quickly concealed it, folding the paper and tucking it into his pocket. "Appreciate the effort," he said, his tone calm. Susan seemed momentarily disarmed by his response, but quickly regained her composure, resting her hands on her hips. "Listen," she said, her voice dropping, as though she were sharing a secret. "I'm just trying to be realistic with you. Prestige Motors isn't for everyone. I don't want to waste your time." Daryl met her gaze, his expression unwavering. "And what exactly makes you think I'm not your target customer?" Susan hesitated for a split second before replying. "I've been doing this a long time. I can tell when someone's out of their depth. The tension in the air was palpable, but Daryl's calm presence remained unshaken. His silent challenge left Susan with little else to say, and with a final stiff smile, she turned and walked away. Daryl stood there, watching her retreat, his mind already running through his next steps. He wasn't just observing today, he was setting the stage for the changes he planned to make. Out of their depth, Daryl repeated, his voice neutral, almost thoughtful. Interesting. There was a flicker of uncertainty in Susan's eyes, but she pressed on. I'm just being honest. It's better to be upfront than to have someone leave disappointed. Daryl let out a soft chuckle, shaking his head slightly. Honest, huh? I like honesty. How about this? You let me speak to the owner. Think we can make that happen? Susan's eyebrows shot up. For the first time, she seemed genuinely caught off guard. The owner. That's right, Daryl said, his tone light, almost conversational. I'd like to have a word with them. Susan's lips twitched in a poor attempt at a smile. Well, that's not possible today. The owner doesn't just drop by for casual visits. They're a busy person. I'm sure they are, Daryl said, nodding slightly. But maybe you could give them a call and let them know I'm here. I think they'd want to meet me. Susan's smile tightened. She was beginning to lose patience, and it showed. Look, sir, I'm trying to be as polite as possible, but this is getting ridiculous. I have other customers to attend to. If you're serious about buying a car, we can schedule a meeting with one of our sales consultants. Otherwise what? Daryl asked, his tone still calm, though there was an unmistakable edge to his voice now. Susan's eyes narrowed, her frustration bubbling to the surface. Otherwise, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Daryl stood still, his gaze locked on hers for a moment. The entire showroom seemed to hold its breath. If you find these stories inspiring and they motivate you to take action, please comment 9. If not, comment 0. Your feedback means a lot to us. Thank you for your valuable time. Then, slowly, Daryl reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. All right, he said, scrolling through his contacts. I'll make the call myself. Susan blinked, her brow furrowing. What are you doing? Just calling the owner, Daryl replied, lifting the phone to his ear. Shouldn't take long. Susan's confidence faltered, her irritation giving way to confusion. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Around them, a few employees had stopped what they were doing, their attention drawn to the unfolding scene. Daryl held up a finger as if to say, just a moment, then turned slightly away, speaking into the phone. Yeah, it's me, I'm at the dealership. Everything's fine. Just a little misunderstanding. Could you let them know I'm here? He ended the call and slipped the phone back into his pocket, turning back to Susan. They'll be here shortly, he said simply. Susan stared at him, her mouth slightly open. Who did you just call? Daryl didn't answer right away. Instead, he glanced around the showroom, his gaze lingering on the staff who were now watching intently. Yes, we'll find out, he said, his tone almost playful. The tension in the room was palpable, the weight of it pressing down on everyone present. Susan shifted uncomfortably, her composure beginning to crack. Minutes passed, but the room felt frozen in time. Susan busied herself with her clipboard, though her movements were stiff and deliberate, betraying her unease. Daryl, on the other hand, stood casually by one of the luxury SUVs, his calm demeanor only adding to the tension. The few employees scattered around the showroom whispered to one another, stealing glances at the unfolding scene. It was clear everyone was waiting for something or someone. The sound of the main doors opening broke the silence. A sharply dressed man in a navy suit stepped inside, his polished shoes clicking softly against the tile floor. His expression was serious but warm, and his eyes immediately found Daryl. Mr. Carter, the man said with a wide smile, extending his hand as he approached. So good to see you. Daryl returned the handshake with a firm grip, a small smile tugging at the corners of his lips. Thanks for coming, Alex. Appreciate it. The room collectively stiffened. Susan's clipboard nearly slipped from her hands as her eyes darted between Daryl and Alex, the dealership's regional director. Her confusion quickly morphed into visible alarm. Wait, Mr. Carter, she echoed, her voice uncertain. Alex turned to her, his friendly demeanor shifting into something more professional, almost curt. Susan, I see you've already met Mr. Carter. Susan blinked, her mouth opening and closing as though searching for the right words. I didn't realize. You didn't realize he's the new owner of this dealership. Alex finished for her, his tone sharp. He glanced at Daryl, an apologetic look on his face. I trust this wasn't your ideal welcome. Daryl raised a hand, stopping him. It's all right, Alex. I think Susan and I just got off on the wrong foot. His voice was calm, but there was a weight to his words that made the entire room hang on to them. Susan's face turned ashen, and she took a step back, her clipboard clutched to her chest like a lifeline. I'm so sorry, she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't know. You didn't know what? Daryl asked, his tone still gentle but firm. That I could own a place like this. That someone like me might actually belong here. Her eyes widened, and for a moment, she seemed utterly lost. I didn't mean. Daryl held up a hand, cutting her off. It's fine, Susan, really. He took a step closer, his voice dropping just enough to make everyone lean in. But let me ask you something. If I hadn't been the owner, would you have treated me any differently? Would you have given me the same respect you'd give someone who walked in here wearing a suit and tie? Susan opened her mouth, but no words came out. The silence was deafening. Daryl nodded, as though her silence was answer enough. He turned to Alex, his voice carrying a new authority. Let's gather everyone in the conference room. I think it's time we had a little chat about how things are run around here. The employees filed into the sleek conference room, the air thick with tension. The room, designed to impress, was all glass walls and modern furnishings, but today it felt stifling. Susan sat near the back, her usual confident demeanor replaced with a nervous stillness. Daryl stood at the head of the table, calm and collected. His presence commanded the attention of everyone in the room. Alex remained near the door, arms crossed, his expression unreadable as he watched the staff take their seats. The quiet murmur of whispers died down as Daryl cleared his throat, his gaze sweeping across the group. Thank you all for joining me on short notice, Daryl began, his tone measured but firm. For those of you who don't know, my name is Daryl Carter, and as of last month, I'm the new owner of Prestige Motors. There were murmurs of surprise from a few employees, their reactions ranging from curiosity to embarrassment. Susan sank lower in her chair, avoiding eye contact. I came here today dressed casually for a reason, Daryl continued, his voice steady. I wanted to see how this dealership operates when no one knows who I am. I wanted to experience what a potential customer might feel walking through these doors. He let the words settle for a moment before continuing. What I experienced today was disappointing. I was judged not for what I could bring to the table, but for how I looked. And I'm not here to single anyone out, but we need to talk about what that says about the culture of this dealership. Susan shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her face flushed. Daryl's eyes briefly flicked to her before moving back to the group as a whole. This isn't just about me, he said. It's about every person who walks through those doors, every customer who doesn't fit into someone's preconceived notion of what a luxury car buyer looks like. One of the younger sales associates raised his hand hesitantly. Daryl nodded toward him. Go ahead, Mr. Carter, the man began nervously. I think most of us try to treat customers fairly, but sometimes it's hard not to make assumptions. Daryl nodded, his expression thoughtful. I get that, he said. We all have biases, whether we want to admit it or not. But here's the thing. It's not enough to just try to be fair. We have to actively challenge those biases. We have to create an environment where everyone feels respected, regardless of their appearance, background, or anything else. He paused, letting the words sink in before continuing. This dealership has built a reputation for excellence, but excellence isn't just about the cars we sell. It's about the experience we provide. And from now on, that experience is going to be built on respect, inclusivity, and fairness. There was a ripple of agreement around the room, though a few faces remained wary. Daryl's gaze settled on Susan, who sat frozen, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Susan, he said gently but firmly, I want to give you the opportunity to speak. Is there anything you'd like to say? All eyes turned to her. She hesitated, her voice barely audible when she finally spoke. I made a mistake, she admitted, her cheeks flushed. I misjudged you, and for that, I'm truly sorry. Daryl nodded, his expression unreadable. Thank you for saying that, he said. I hope this experience will serve as a reminder for all of us, not just you, because change starts with accountability. He turned back to the group. Moving forward, we'll be implementing new training programs to ensure this dealership represents the values I believe in. Every customer deserves to be treated with dignity, no exceptions. If anyone has an issue with that, now's the time to speak up. The room was silent. The silence in the conference room was deafening, broken only by the faint hum of the air conditioning. No one spoke. but the weight of Daryl's words lingered, pressing on everyone present. Daryl let the quiet stretch just long enough to make his point before speaking again, his voice calm but resolute. "Good," he said. "I'm glad to see we're all on the same page. Change isn't always easy, but it's necessary, and this dealership is going to lead by example." He took a step away from the table, his hands resting lightly on its edge as he leaned forward slightly. "Let me make something clear. I didn't come here today to humiliate anyone. I came to understand what kind of culture I've inherited and how we can make it better." His eyes moved to Susan, who still sat quietly near the back. "Susan," he said, his tone softening just enough to make it clear he wasn't attacking her. "You're an experienced manager, and I'm sure you've worked hard to get where you are, but today was a wake-up call for you and for all of us." Susan met Daryl's gaze, her voice shaking but sincere. "I was wrong, and I'll do whatever it takes to make it right." Daryl nodded. "I believe in second chances, but accountability comes first. We'll discuss next steps one-on-one. For now, let's move forward." He turned to the team. "We're not just selling cars, we're building trust and relationships, representing a standard of excellence. If you're on board, I'm here to support you." A genuine murmur of agreement filled the room. Even Alex, standing by the door, nodded. Daryl smiled, a faint but determined expression. "Let's get back to work. How we treat people matters more than what we sell." As the team filed out, Susan lingered by the door. She approached Daryl, her hands twisting nervously. "I want to thank you for giving me a chance to do better. I won't let you down." Daryl met her earnest gaze. "I hope you mean that. Actions speak louder than words, but people can change." "I am," she replied, nodding. Daryl watched her leave, then turned to Alex. "Set up a meeting next week. I want everyone to know what's expected." Alex grinned. "Got it, boss." Daryl felt optimistic, knowing the work ahead would be about more than just selling cars. It was about creating something bigger.